My name is Elijah Monroe. I'm 41 years old. And this is the day my past came knocking when I least expected it. I was standing in the marble hallway of Golden Haven Care Center, pen in hand, ready to sign a $500,000 donation check. The kind of check that makes headlines and buys a few clean photographs for the company's annual report. The kind of gesture my PR team called legacy work. But just as the ink touched paper, I heard the sharp click of shoes echoing down the corridor. A nurse appeared, red-faced, hurried, and she was dragging an elderly black woman by the wrist. The woman looked at me like she'd just stepped out of a storm that lasted years. Her voice cracked, small but certain. "Eli. My boy. My little builder." Everything froze. The humming lights. The scent of lemon disinfectant. Even my pulse. The nurse mumbled something about confusion, dementia, and a patient who mixed fantasy with memory. But when she said the woman's name, Clara Robinson, something splintered deep inside me. If you're feeling this story, subscribe to Principled Stories and tap like. YouTube's algorithm might not. Show us to each other again, and we share real stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. See, I was raised in privilege, the adopted son of William and Elaine Monroe. My father ran a Chicago firm that built skyscrapers. My mother served on charity boards where kindness was measured in donations. I grew up believing my nanny left suddenly because of personal problems. That's how they phrased it. Personal problems. I was 5. Too young to argue and too eager to keep my place in a picture-perfect family. But when Clara lifted her chin and found my eyes, I remembered. A kitchen radio, oatmeal with too much cinnamon, a song hummed off-key just to make me laugh, little towers made from cereal boxes, the smell of warmth and soap and love that didn't care what color it was. I asked, "What's happening here?" My voice sounded smaller than I expected. The head nurse, Patricia Lane, tried to smooth it over. "Mr. Monroe, she does this to every male visitor, severe dementia. We'll take her back to her room." But I didn't move. Something about walking away felt like abandoning a version of myself I hadn't met in decades. I sat beside Clara under a painting of fake sunflowers, and I started asking questions, the kind that test whether a ghost can still remember your name. Who taught me to tie my shoes? What did I call the frying pan I wasn't supposed to touch? Which bedtime story chased away the nightmares? Clara answered every one, not by guessing, by remembering. Details so small they lived somewhere deeper than memory. And when I asked what happened the day she left, her eyes clouded over but her voice stayed steady. A man in a suit came. Said a black nanny didn't belong in a white boy's house. Said if I didn't leave quiet they'd call it kidnapping. That's when a name surfaced like a dead thing rising. Charles Benton, a lawyer who specialized in discreet adoptions for powerful people. I felt the world tilt. Patricia stepped forward, voice clipped. "Mr. Monroe, you're upsetting her. Let's discuss your generous donation instead." I folded the check, slipped it back into my pocket, and told Clara softly, "I'll be back tomorrow." That night, in my penthouse overlooking the skyline, I stood over a glass of whiskey I didn't want and called my assistant, Jonas Rivera. "I need everything on Patricia Lane. Who funds the clinic? Whether Benton and Associates still moves money." 2 hours later, Jonas called back. His voice carried the weight of bad truth. Patricia was receiving extra monthly payments from an offshore account controlled by Benton's firm. And Clara? She hadn't wandered in from the street. She'd been transferred here after 25 years inside a private psychiatric facility. Authorization signed by none other than William Monroe. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered. The next morning, I brought in my own neurologist, Dr. Alina Foster, cash retainer, no strings. She spent hours with Clara, testing her reflexes, her pupils, her memory. When she finished, she turned to me and said quietly, "This isn't dementia. It's trauma and decades of over-medication. Someone's been keeping her fogged on purpose." Patricia was standing in the doorway again, lips tight. "We follow medical orders, sir." I asked, "Whose orders?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Dr. Benton." I pressed harder. "And who pays those invoices?" Her eyes flickered. "The Monroe Foundation. That night, my father called. His tone was calm, almost rehearsed. Eli, your mother and I heard you've been visiting a patient. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. We did what was best for you. I asked him how he already knew Clara's name. The silence on the line told me everything his words wouldn't. Did you ever have a moment, I said, where doing what's best just meant doing what's easy? He sighed. You'll understand someday. I hung up. Do you think there's ever a point where the truth hurts more than the lie that protected it? I wonder that a lot now. By morning, I had Michael Ortiz, a relentless investigative attorney, sitting across from me at my conference table. He spread out folders, court documents, financial trails. It's not just you, Eli, he said. Benton built a machine. Fake diagnoses, sealed adoptions, bribes to judges. We've got at least 15 families over 40 years. My stomach turned. We contacted prosecutor Dana Whitfield, a woman known for dismantling political corruption. She flipped through the evidence and looked at me dead in the eye. If you go through with this, you'll destroy your family name. But you might save 100 others. I said, the family name isn't worth saving. Her smile was sad. Good, because you're about to set it on fire. We moved fast. Jonas tracked payments. Michael drafted affidavits. Alina prepared her medical report, a clean surgical piece of truth. Dana's office mirrored hard drives, pulled sealed medical records, and issued quiet subpoenas. Clara stayed with me through it all, her clarity returning each day as the drugs faded. She told me about others, nannies, caregivers, mothers, silenced under the same system. When I admitted I was scared, she squeezed my hand and said, "Baby, fear's just the last costume a lie wears before it runs." That line, it's been living rent-free in my chest ever since. Do you believe fear is the last disguise before the truth shows its face? At 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, unmarked cars flooded the suburbs. Agents fanned out like chess pieces. Team Alpha, William Monroe in custody. Team Bravo, Patricia Lane detained. Team Charlie, records seized at Benton and Associates. When they brought my father out in his robe, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, he called from the holding cell later that day. Eli, this is a misunderstanding. We loved you, we protected you. I told him, you wrapped lies in charity and called it protection. You stole a mother and built a kingdom on her silence. Then I hung up. That afternoon, Dana held a press conference. Cameras, microphones, all of it. She laid out the evidence, falsified charts, fraudulent adoptions, hush money through foundations. By evening, justice for Clara was trending across every network. Donors scrambled to distance themselves. Clinics released statements. And people who'd lived behind closed doors began to speak, for the first time in decades. 3 days later, I moved Clara into a house full of sunlight, with a garden that hummed with life. When I asked how it felt, she smiled and said, like the air finally remembers me. We converted Golden Haven's West Wing into the Clara Robinson Welcome Center, a refuge for those silenced by the same machine, a place where no one would ever be treated like a diagnosis again. And yet, some nights, I still can't sleep long. Michael found files suggesting this was just one branch of a larger network. And when I sit with Clara on the porch, she seems to know what I'm thinking. When you're ready, she says, we'll go again. And I nod, because she's the bravest soul I've ever met. Do you think justice ever truly ends? Or does it just rest between battles? ChatGPT said, weeks after the arrests, the world had already moved on, at least the parts of it that could afford to. The headlines faded, the cameras found new scandals, and the city slipped back into its rhythm of glass towers and polite lies. But for me, the silence after the storm was heavier than the noise ever was. Clara's recovery became my anchor. She started remembering more. Faces, songs, the smell of rain through cracked windows. Some mornings, I'd find her in the garden humming, eyes closed, sun warming her skin. She looked peaceful. But every once in a while, her voice would tremble and she'd say, Eli, they still got others out there. She wasn't wrong. Jonas found traces of secondary shell foundations, names like Harper Outreach and Future, Care International. each one funneling money into hidden facilities across the Midwest. They'd been clever this time. Private trusts, shell LLCs, offshore boards that didn't technically exist. One night, as I was looking over the files, I caught my reflection. In the window, same tailored suit, same skyline behind me, and for the first time, I saw what my father must have seen all those years ago. A man built by the same system he thought he could control. The thought made me sick. I called Dana. How deep do we go before we start drowning? She exhaled through the phone. That depends on whether you're trying to expose them or dismantle them. I told her I wanted both. If you're watching this far, what would you do in my place? Would you risk burning down what's left of your life if it meant freeing strangers you'll never meet? 2 weeks later, I flew with Jonas to a quiet town in Indiana. One of the Shell Foundations owned an assisted care home there. On paper, it looked legitimate, but when we arrived, something was wrong. The staff were jumpy, evasive. One nurse slipped me a folded note before rushing off. Inside, in shaky handwriting, were 3 words: help them leave. We came back at night. Jonas waited in the car, and I used the master key we'd recovered from the files. The air inside was cold and smelled like antiseptic and fear. Room after room, people sedated, restrained, labeled with medical terms that justified their captivity. Some were barely conscious. Some stared through me like ghosts that forgot how to vanish. I found one woman awake. She looked no older than 30. When she saw me, her voice cracked like glass. "You're not one of them, are you?" I said, "No. I'm here to get you out." Her name was Lena Myers, a caregiver who'd tried to report Benton's organization years ago. They'd silenced her, declared her delusional, locked her away under her own name. That's how they worked. Truth became insanity when the wrong people told it. I called Dana immediately. Within 48 hours, she had local authorities involved. A coordinated rescue followed. Quiet, surgical, efficient. 24 victims freed. Each story more horrifying than the last. And yet, as I walked through those halls, part of me still felt the weight of my father's shadow. Every corner whispered the same truth. His money built this. His choices allowed it. My silence, however ignorant, had helped keep it hidden. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on Clara's porch again, staring at the stars. She joined me, wrapped in her shawl, eyes soft. "You did good, baby," she said. I shook my head. "It's not enough." She smiled faintly. "It never is. But you did something. Most folks just talk about it." Her words hit like prayer. Because she was right. Justice wasn't an endpoint. It was a practice, a rhythm, a decision you kept making, even when it hurt. Months passed. We built a legal initiative with Dana's office, the Horizon Network. We trained young lawyers, social workers, investigators. Jonas handled logistics. Alina vetted every new case. Clara became our matriarch, the soul of the mission. Her presence reminded everyone what truth looked like when it survived the fire. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't wonder sometimes how far forgiveness was supposed to reach. My father's sentencing was coming up, and the court wanted a statement from me, something to read before the judge. That letter sat blank on my desk for 3 days. What could I possibly say? He'd taken everything from her. He'd taken me from her. And yet, when I imagined looking him in the eye again, all I could feel was exhaustion. No rage, no triumph, just the hollow quiet that comes after too much truth. So I went to Clara and asked, "What would you say to him if you had the chance?" She didn't even think. "I'd tell him I prayed he sleeps someday, that's all." The simplicity of it broke me. Do you believe forgiveness is a form of freedom, or a burden disguised as mercy? The day of the sentencing, the courtroom was full. My father sat at the defense table, thinner, older, but still trying to wear authority like armor. When it was my turn, I walked up to the microphone. The air was so still, it almost rang. "I used to think justice was about punishment," I said. "Now I think it's about truth finally being louder than money." He didn't look at me, not once. The judge read the sentence, 20 years. A sound escaped my mother, a broken, trembling sob that no one comforted. When it was over, I walked outside, the cold air cutting through my lungs like glass. Dana joined me on the courthouse steps. "You did the right thing," she said. "Feels like I just buried a part of myself," I replied. She nodded. "Maybe that's what doing the right thing feels like." I didn't go back inside. I went home, to Clara's house, to the place where the air remembered her name. She was baking something. Cookies, I think. She smiled when she saw me and said, "You look lighter." Maybe I was. Or maybe she just wanted me to believe I could be. Winter settled over Chicago like a slow exhale. The city glittered under frost, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was part of it. I was just watching it breathe. The noise, the ambition, the endless chase for more. All of it felt smaller now. Clara and I spent most mornings sitting by the big bay window in her kitchen. She'd hum while stirring coffee, and I'd answer emails from our foundation. The Horizon Network was growing faster than any of us expected. Within 6 months, we'd opened offices in 4 states. Survivors were reaching out every day. Lawyers, nurses, and volunteers were joining, not for glory, but because they'd seen something in our story that made them believe change was still possible. But every light casts a shadow. One morning, Jonas came in pale, holding his phone like bad news. "Eli, we've got a problem." He set it on the table. It was an anonymous tip sent to our website. Someone claiming Benton's network was still operational, just under new leadership. They even attached financial transfers traced to an entity called the Evermore Collective. The name alone made my stomach knot. When I showed it to Dana, she frowned. "They always adapt. They always rebrand. You cut one branch, they grow 2 more. Clara was listening from the porch. "You can't save the whole forest, baby," she said softly. "Just keep the fire from spreading." But the truth was, I couldn't stop now. Too many faces haunted me. Too many names. We started digging again, quietly this time. Jonas handled logistics. Alina reviewed the new medical records that had surfaced, and Dana coordinated with the FBI through back channels. Within weeks, patterns emerged. New facilities, same tactics. A new lawyer fronting the operation, Harold Price, one of Benton's old associates. When I saw his picture, something inside me clenched. He looked ordinary, clean-cut, polite. The kind of man people trusted instantly. That made him dangerous. We arranged a meeting under false pretenses, the Horizon Network posing as potential donors for one of Evermore's rehabilitation programs. The appointment was set for a Thursday morning in a downtown office that looked too expensive for what they claimed to do. I remember walking in and feeling that old weight in my chest, the smell of money mixed with secrets. Price greeted me with a practiced smile. "Mr. Monroe, I've heard of your organization. Impressive work." He offered his hand. I shook it, feeling the faint tremor of nerves underneath. That told me everything I needed to know. He already suspected. "Tell me," I said, "what kind of patients does Evermore specialize in?" "Primarily trauma recovery," he replied smoothly. "Those abandoned by the system. We offer dignity and structure." That word, structure, sent a chill up my spine. Benton had used the same language decades ago. I glanced at the photos on the wall. Smiling patients, clean rooms, false peace. "Mind if I visit one of your centers?" I asked. His smile tightened. "We're very selective about visitors." "Understandable," I said. "But selective isn't the same as transparent, is it?" For a moment, something in his expression cracked. He recovered quickly, offered a tour in the future. But as I stood to leave, he said something that made my skin crawl. "You should be careful, Mr. Monroe. The world's full of ghosts looking for someone to blame." That night, my phone buzzed. No number, just a voice recording. It was Clara's address, followed by a low male voice whispering, "Stop digging." My blood went cold. Jonas and I got there in 12 minutes. The house was fine, doors locked, windows secure. But Clara was sitting in her chair, hands shaking. "A car stopped outside," she said quietly. "Didn't see who. Just felt wrong." That's when I realized this wasn't about justice anymore. It was survival. Do you think there's ever a line where seeking justice turns into inviting danger? Or do you think the truth is always worth the risk? We installed security cameras, hired protection, and moved Clara to a safe location under Dana's supervision. I wanted her to rest, but she refused to leave without saying something first. She took my hand and said, "Eli, every time you chase darkness, promise me you'll remember to look for light too." I promised. I meant it. But promises don't always hold when the past still has teeth. The next week, Jonas uncovered a flight log, private jets registered under shell corporations tied to the Evermore Collective. One route stood out, Chicago to Atlanta, same passengers every month, same payment source. A transport pipeline. They were moving people again. Dana ordered surveillance. Alina quietly coordinated with hospital contacts. And me? I couldn't stop thinking about that voice recording. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Late one night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. "You're being watched." I walked to the window. Across the street, under a flickering street lamp, a dark sedan idled. 2 silhouettes inside. No plates, no movement, just watching. I stared for a long time. My hands didn't shake, but my breath did, because this time, I knew something for certain. When you expose people who make their living in the shadows, they don't go quietly. And maybe, neither could I. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The apartment felt wrong, too quiet, too still, the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat sound like footsteps. I pulled the curtains aside, and the sedan from last night was gone. But somehow, that made it worse. Jonas showed up with 2 coffees, his face drawn and sleepless. "They've scrubbed the servers," he said. "All Evermore's public data, deleted overnight. It's like they saw us coming." I leaned against the counter, rubbing my temples. "Someone's feeding them information. Inside Horizon?" he asked. "Or maybe higher than that," I said quietly. That was when Dana called. Her voice was sharp, controlled. "Eli, I just got word. 2 witnesses under protective custody vanished. No sign of forced entry. We think they were moved." "Moved where?" Her pause told me everything. We met at her office downtown. Blinds drawn, tension thick. She dropped a folder on the desk, grainy surveillance stills from airport security. One of the missing witnesses being escorted by men in suits. Not uniforms. Private, expensive, invisible to oversight. "Private contractors," Dana said. "Same logistics firm tied to your father's old foundation." The room tilted. "You're telling me they're still using his infrastructure?" "Not exactly," she said. "They just never stopped." I felt the old fury building. The kind that burns slow and deep. The kind you mistake for purpose. That night, I went back to the penthouse. I sat in the dark and listened to the city hum like a living thing. I couldn't tell if I was about to do something brave or reckless, or if those 2 words had finally become the same thing. My father's sentencing hadn't ended anything. It just pried open the next layer of rot. I opened my laptop and started digging, not through databases, but through memory. My father had always kept hard copies of confidential files at our lake house, a secluded place in Michigan he called the Retreat. If Evermore was built on his skeletons, the proof might still be there. Jonas tried to stop me. "Eli, don't go alone." But some ghosts you have to face by yourself. The next day, I drove north. Wind off the lake, sky the color of cold steel. The house sat half hidden behind dead pines, shutters rattling, driveway choked with leaves. I hadn't been there since I was 19. Inside, everything smelled like dust and old secrets. I found the study, the same mahogany desk, the same heavy drawers. The bottom one stuck halfway. I had to force it open. Inside was a single box, a leather folder, brittle photographs, and a series of ledgers marked Community Care Initiative. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Payments, transfers, offshore accounts, not just Benton or Price, dozens of names. Judges, donors, government liaisons, all connected. Then I saw something worse. A letter addressed to my father, signed Harold Price. Operations will continue under revised branding. Your prior contributions ensure discretion. Any remaining liabilities will be managed internally. Liabilities. That's what they called people like Clara. I sank into the chair, heart pounding. For the first time I realized my father hadn't just known. He'd designed the system to outlive him. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard it. A floorboard creaked down the hallway. "Jonas?" I called out. No answer. Then another step. Slow, deliberate. The study door creaked open an inch, enough for a shadow to spill across the floor. My pulse went wild. "Mr. Monroe," a voice said. Calm, male, familiar. "You shouldn't have come here." It was Price. He stepped into the dim light. Coat damp with rain. Smile sharp as glass. "You really think you can dismantle an empire built before you were even born?" "You're hiding behind corpses," I said. "You think that's power?" "It's survival," he replied. "The same thing you're doing." I reached into my pocket, pretending to check my phone. But he noticed. His eyes flicked down, amused. "Don't bother calling anyone. You've got no signal here." He took a step closer. "You can walk away, Eli. You've already won the public sympathy. Be the hero. Let this go. And if I don't?" He smiled again. "Then you disappear, just like the others." He turned and left, just like that. No gun, no threats shouted, no violence. Just the calm assurance of a man who'd already decided how the story would end. When I walked back outside, my car tires were slashed. My phone, dead. The road ahead, swallowed by mist. I wasn't scared then, just aware. This was no longer a fight for closure. It was a war for truth. Do you think every pursuit of justice demands a piece of your soul in exchange? By the time I made it back to the city, Dana was waiting. She didn't ask how I looked so shaken. She already knew. "Whatever you found," she said, "we use it. Carefully. Strategically." I handed her the files. "There's enough here to bury them." She looked through them and nodded slowly. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." But I could tell she was worried. Not just for me, for all of us. Because once you drag power into daylight, it fights back with everything it has left. That night, I went to see Clara. She was on the porch again, humming to herself. The sky was soft with snow. "Baby," she said, "your eyes look heavy." I smiled weakly. "Guess I forgot what peace feels like." She took my hand. "Then remember this. Truth costs, but silence costs your soul." And in that moment, I realized something simple and terrible. I wasn't done. Not even close. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than usual, washing the city clean, or at least pretending to. By then, the investigation had become national news. The ever more collective was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. Dana's task force raided 3 more facilities, uncovering records that stretched back half a century. Benton, Price, and nearly 20 others were indicted under federal charges of human trafficking and fraud. I should have felt relief, triumph, maybe, but instead, I felt hollow, like I'd spent so long fighting monsters that I'd forgotten what it meant to live without them. The day Price was arrested, he looked straight at the camera and smiled. That smile haunted me for weeks, because men like him never believed they'd lose. They just waited for the world to forget. Clara didn't forget. She refused to. She was the first one to testify in court, standing proud, voice trembling. Only once when she said, "You can't medicate truth forever." The entire room went silent. Even the judge blinked like he'd just remembered what justice sounded like. When it was my turn, I read my statement. What you built wasn't a system of care. It was a machine that fed on silence. And silence ends today. I didn't look at my father's old colleagues as I said it. I didn't need to. They were already ghosts. Weeks later, the verdicts came in. Guilty on all major counts. Sentences that would outlive most of them. Headlines called it the Horizon Trials. Dana was promoted to federal prosecutor. Jonas became the foundation's director. Alina joined the board of ethics, pushing for new oversight laws in mental health care. And Clara, she finally started planting again. Sunflowers, tomatoes, mint, things that grew toward light. I helped her every weekend. Sometimes we'd just sit, quiet, letting the breeze fill the spaces where words used to hurt. One evening she said, "You did it, baby. You turned what broke you into something that heals." I smiled. "You did that first." She laughed. "Maybe, but you finished it." I still think about my father sometimes, whether he believed, in those final years, that he'd done the right thing, or whether he just couldn't face how wrong he'd been. Forgiveness doesn't come easy. Some days it feels like mercy, other days, like betrayal. But I've learned it isn't something you give for them. It's something you give to yourself so you can keep moving forward. Justice doesn't erase the past. It just gives the future a place to stand. Now, every year on the anniversary of Clara's freedom, we open the doors of the Clara Robinson Welcome Center to new families, survivors, advocates, ordinary people who still believe good can outlast cruelty. And when I walk those halls, hearing laughter instead of silence, I realize something. Peace isn't loud, but it echoes. So here I am, telling you this story, not because I want you to remember me, but because I want you to remember her. Because one woman's truth can pull down a kingdom of lies. If you've stayed with me this far, tell me, have you ever had to face a truth that changed everything you thought you knew? Would you have done what I did? Drop your city and time zone in the comments. Tell me what justice means to you. And if this story hits something deep, subscribe to Principled Stories and share it with someone who still believes the truth can set us free.